of time for a chat. We've got about half an hour, I think. There's more. Bronwyn just popped up on my screen. Hi, Bronwyn. We've got half an hour, so I think if people want to ask questions, there are a couple that are already there in the chat, and I can go back to them. But yeah, just take your time, and if you've got anything that you want to ask, please pop them into the chat, and I'll try and go through. There was an early question, if I can find it, that was for you, Liz. There are a couple actually, and I realised because the theme of this conference is work in progress, and the really great thing about hearing about Narara is that the work in progress that's actually being put into practice there on the ground. So let me just see if I can find. Okay, so the first question is for Liz. Are people able to be on more than one team? So overlapping between the circle as well as in the steering circle?
Absolutely. Insofar as there's double linking between two circles, then they actually have to be on more than one team if they're the link. And there's no constraint on how many circles you can be a part of. It just is, a matter of how much time do you have. So, yeah, there's no rules about that beyond the double linking one, which is, in fact, says you have to.
There was also another question. Someone was curious about what kinds of innovation are happening in regard to land management at Narara.
I'm probably not the best person to answer that, but there is we have quite a commitment to the principles of permaculture, which of course is an ongoing innovative process in that you need to pay close attention to what's going on, which can sometimes look like an innovation in itself. We have a steam weeder. So one of the big kerfuffles in the group has been, how do we manage the weeds, and a very strong push from some people to use Roundup, and including bush management people who say this Roundup is targeted specifically at things inside the bush, so you don't rip it out and create more problem. So as part of that, we've ended up buying together a steam weeder. So it's good for doing the sides of the roads, and you can reach into the bush a little bit with it, but not very much. So that's basically a boiler on a trailer at the back of a truck. I don't know if that counts as an innovation. And there's a sort of general interest in community supported agriculture. And we have also greenhouses where we're doing experiments with different styles, or not so much styles of growing as mixtures in the soil. So it might not look too much like innovation to you, but we also have community gardens we haven't started yet because we're still building our houses. So the gardens will come later, and we'll be working together in those gardens. So you might get a better answer in 5 years' time or 2 years' time.
I might just mention, I guess it's not really a question, it was from Bronwyn, and Bronwyn might even like to speak to this, but she popped a question, or just a comment in the chat addressed to Sonia about how the Citizens Assemblies, Coalition of Everything, these are fabulous ideas, and how can we get them into our schools, particularly at primary school level, because she's already noticed that her children who are not yet 12 have already expressed their loss of faith in democracy. And I know you responded in the chat, Sonia, but I just thought it might be something you want to chat to just quickly.
Yeah, what we're trying to do, it's mainly here in Victoria that we're working at the moment, just because that's where I'm based in particular, is we're trying to work with lower secondary schools to try to run citizens' assemblies for primary schools. Because lower secondary is when kids are at most risk of disengaging with the formal education system. So we're experimenting with doing that, and we've got quite a few schools who are interested. We've got a lot more kids who are interested than we've got schools that are interested, to be honest. There's a few kids that were like, when are we going to be able to do this in our school? But the schools have been, partly because of the COVID response and things, a little bit less quick on the uptake. But we have got 4 or 5 that are interested, and I really love to hear from anyone that's an educator and wants to try it out in schools that they're working with, because I think it's a really good way of disrupting that tie between elections and democracy, and kids act as great ambassadors for ideas, I feel.
Thanks, Sonia. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but I think given that
I'd be really interested to hear if anyone wants to comment on their experience of other forms of participation and democracy, like, you know, or in their own lives, or yeah, I'd be really interested to hear from you. It's kind of really odd, right, when we're on this thing and there's black screens and there's a few faces. So I don't know if people felt like sharing anything about their own experiences with this kind of stuff, even if it's different or none of it resonated what we were talking about.
I can see Eileen's got her hand up.
And it's for you, Sonia. I was just wondering, remember how a couple of federal elections ago, we had parties, there were small independent parties where you could elect someone who would then represent your ideas. What were they called? And I don't know what happened to those 2 parties. And you could elect them electronically, a bit like you were saying, how, you know, can anyone remember what happened to those 2 parties? Or they intrigued me, but then they never, no?
I know that there are still a couple of people looking at initiatives like that, and that there are some moves to get people together for the next general election, but I'm not sure what happened to the ones that were around then.
They just disappeared. Just was wondering. They obviously didn't get elected.
Weren't they in the Senate? Was it mainly in the Senate that they were trying to?
Yes.
Something, I think they were called something to do with direct democracy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you presented your ideas electronically.
Yeah. I think they were going to try and do a tech element. Yeah, absolutely. There've been a couple of examples of those pop up in Senate, federal elections, and I think maybe state. I'm not quite sure. I suppose speaking to Sarah's point of what experiences people have had, I suppose mine has been negative, and that's what motivates, I suppose, perhaps a lot of us, because out of the bad stuff, hopefully change comes, and that's kind of there are a few kind of sayings by, I can't remember who just at the moment because I didn't think I'd be speaking, but having natural democracy in the household, I've seen the disparity, and I don't know if that's something that the comment about the kids already losing faith, is that they can see the difference between what happens in the home when the home works well and people have a voice within the home about decision making. And I suppose that's a cause for hope, because in not all, but in a lot of families, there hopefully is a fair speaking process and a fair way of making decisions to an extent, and that perhaps can help people to be motivated to get that in a bigger sense, perhaps. Just thought I'd say that, throw that out there.
Yeah, well, that there's a lot of these movements. It starts with kinship relationships and beyond heteronormative families. You know, it's like extended families and then coming together to ensure survival, but then also remembering, right, and reclaiming wisdoms that have been denied, or, you know, all the different processes that happen. And for me, that's actually the way up. And maybe we don't even want to go up, like that's the way across to networks. So, you know, like this whole thing of reimagining the very institutions of power and you know, I'm very mindful not to place a lot of illusion into dominant forms of governance and sovereignty and state. So I actually think the hope's there, and that the slippage is when liberalism becomes the way we think democracy is run, that we think liberal democracy in this nation state is the only way that we can organize power and sovereignty and authority, and that's a story. Do you know what I mean? And it's not our story, like in terms of the communities I work with and kin and stuff. So I think also giving space for that, to break the idea that if it's this or it's nothing, it's authoritarianism. If it's not this, that's rubbish. There's loads of other forms of democratic life.
Right. Oh, so I was just thinking of a comment there based on Jonathan Strauss made a comment in the chat there about the capitalist interests, and wondering, Sarah, if you have any thoughts about separating property from governance, as it were, because in the case of liberalism, it's all about property. It's about rights attaching to what you own, what you can control.
Well, yeah, because there's been so this movement is a site of struggle over land and sovereignty over land, control over, like taking land back, and it's other forms of property. I mean, in the sense it's collective, so they have fought to get legal recognition, so they're not always being invaded by the military and, you know, the multinationals, because there's this loophole in the constitution, so they can be useful to push back on. But it's all about then more coming in common, right, and collective forms of both family but community. I mean, ownership's a weird word because it's not necessarily in the capitalist sense of ownership, but responsibility too. A particular country or a particular, you know, part of Madre Tierra. So yeah, property's massive, right? And property's so huge, like here in the colonial capitalist heritage, it's like property, right, mastery, power, you know, like housing. Like I've been having this experience of housing at the moment. I'm a single parent, I'm a race woman. Oh my God, the violences that get enacted if you are not a property owner and you don't even want to be, like an individual, the assumptions about lack of right and about kind of lack of right to dignity and respect. So these fault lines of the, you know, social reproductive terrain, I think, and in Newcastle are mega because they're gentrifying and encouraging even more bloody private ownership, and that in the interstices of everyday life, ordinary people are kind of being able to have mastery over others. So yeah, I think it's I think it's quite, yeah.
And I think there's a danger if we think about democracy being captured by capitalist interests. I think that democracy was, the way that it is today, was always about protecting capitalist interests. The elections were about protecting the ways in which people who already had access to the levers of power maintained that access over the levers of power. So I think it's not just that it's been captured by big capital, it's that it was always meant to be an enabler of big capital.
I thought it was really interesting to hear earlier about the enthusiasm that the people in Narara are demonstrating. You know, they're volunteers, but they're so enthusiastic and committed because what has been built slowly over time is trust, and that we can see how trust is used, or lack of trust is used to entrench power, because, and the American elections have just sort of been such a demonstration of this happening, because you've seen that. I think I was fascinated to hear that, you know, people that we thought were potentially good candidates for the Democrats just couldn't afford to keep running, because at some point you actually just run out of money and you have to withdraw from the race. So, so you can see how that power, as you say, is being used there to entrench a type of capitalism. So, that was interesting to me to think about the connection between that lack of trust and how we all become so cynical, and that cynicism often leads to apathy. Then representative democracy, we're also removed from it and it doesn't work. So we lose confidence, we lose trust, and then we don't participate. Okay, anybody else got any questions, or people wanting to have a little bit extra time over lunch? We're happy to stay around a bit longer. Let me know. Okay, thank you everyone. I think it's been an amazing session, and it was lovely to have a theme continue on from this morning. But I think we're all mindful that we're going to be doing a lot of Zooming over the next few days, and it takes quite a lot of stamina. So please, yes, go and enjoy some lunch, and look forward to seeing you back in one of the sessions this afternoon. But thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Liz, and also Sonia. Terrific presentations, and definitely food for thought. And I think a lot of this is about digesting and thinking about how we respond to these, and that can take a bit of time. So I've got a few things that I'm going to be processing this afternoon, but I really enjoyed all of your sessions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.